You need to know what markers to watch and measure to indicate that you're on the right track when designing and testing a product in the market. By setting the metrics before you start your prototyping, you'll be more focused on the elements that are important to the success of your newly created product. This will affect the way you develop your product. Beyond everything else, you need to make sure that your product works for your customers by satisfying at least one of their wants, needs, or pains. We're going to walk through a couple of tools that you can use for your testing processes to make sure that you're connecting with your customers and that you're getting the data that you need to make an informed decision about your product before committing to full-scale production. In this video, we'll be focusing on product market fit tests and the metrics that you can gather around that. Hi, welcome back to the Steps to a Sale-Ready Product video workshop series. In this video, we'll be exploring how you can perform some simple but important tests to make sure that your product is a fit for your intended customers, and to figure out how you can start adjusting things if and when they don't quite fit. We've already previously gone over brainstorming and risk analysis in the previous episodes, so if this is the first video you're seeing in the series and you're new to product development, we recommend going back to watch those first. There's a link to a playlist of all the videos in the series down in the description of the video. So, we're going to do some product testing, but before we do, I want to explain what the testing phase is and why we do it when we're building new products. In this context that we're talking about today, we're using the testing phase to represent the moment after you've made a prototype of some kind, whether detailed or early stage, and getting some feedback from your ideal customer group. The reason we're introducing testing as a concept before we have our session on creating the prototype is because in thinking about what kinds of tests you'll need for your product idea, you're going to very likely be able to see potential problems in advance, and you might be able to avoid a couple rounds of expensive redesigns. In essence, testing is putting your prototype in front of your ideal customers and getting them to interact with it. Testing can involve a variety of methods, but some common ones include observation, interviews, focus groups, videos of users with the product, A/B testing, wireframing, and Mechanical Turk demonstrations. The form of test that'll suit your product best will depend on the kind of product that you're making and what stage of prototyping you're in, as well as what you want to learn from the test. Testing does not need to be complicated. It can be as simple as bringing your target customer into a room with your product and watching how they interact with it. But if you want to get useful results out of your testing, then you need to have a plan before you start. That's what we'll be working on together in this video. Throughout this video, we'll be referencing a bunch of tools from the Design Thinking Toolbox by Michael Lurick, Patrick Link, and Larry Leifer. There's a lot more in there, so if you want to take these processes further, it's a great resource and I definitely recommend it. So, for now, we're going to go to Ian, the executive director of LITE, with a description of the process that they used before and in the testing phase. Important context here is that LITE is a charity that works to create employment opportunities for people with barriers to employment. And as a part of their process, they've hired partner organizations to create or produce food products for a charity hamper that they provide to the local Winnipeg community.
So we start with pre-prototyping and ideation. This is what our student was doing. This is what our executive director did with pancake mixes the first year. We always want to make sure that we actually have something that is worth selling before we try to sell it or provide it to people that we're supporting. It's very important to us that if we're going to donate a product to a family in need, we have to have enough confidence in it that we would sell it to you in the first place. This is a quality marker. That's why we do the pre-prototyping process. This is making sure that our recipes are good quality, that they don't have any allergens, that are unmarked, that they can be prepared by people that maybe are in a rush or just don't have a lot of resources. They need to be accessible. We need to make sure that they work the way that we're intending them to work. That's stage one. For stage two, we actually get into development. We have the product. Now we need to make sure that it's packaged properly. This is where we're dealing with things like logos and proper bagging for food products, making sure that the portions are all correct. If there are standards, we need to make sure that we're meeting them. This is where things go for testing, for nutritional labels, if it's food products. All of the things that once we have the product, we need to make sure that it's ready for transport, ready for distribution, all of the usual sort of let's get ready for sales stuff. That's development, that's stage two. For stage three, we found that it's very useful to have a prototyping or a prototype test market. We don't want to go to wide sale and manufacture 2,000 of something if we're not sure that it's not fit for purpose. So we work with our partners to do limited runs of each product that we do. We try to place them in either a donation capacity or with some small group of people that can use it and give us some feedback to make sure that it actually accomplishes the goal that we've set out for it or addresses the concern that it's meant to address. And then we can be sure, once we've done some of this testing, that our partners can do the process in a repeatable way, that it's not a strain on their resources, that the people that are receiving it actually get value out of it once they have it. And this helps us build our confidence and make sure that, okay, we can now do larger runs. We can decide whether we're going to make it a product that's purely for charitable distribution or for purchase by the public. So now we're at the end of stage 3. We have a product. We're sure that it's ready to go. Let's go with it.
Thanks, Ian. So in LITE's process, the testing was to make sure that it was the right fit with the people that they were looking to serve, as well as fitting the problems that they were looking to solve. The clearest being ease of use and cooking speed for the prepackaged soup mixes, so that they would be accessible for their customers. This brings us to the point of target metrics and how it will change the way you think about prototyping. If you're coming into product development for the first time and you're looking to develop a product proactively without a client or partner telling you what to make, you're going to need to know if you're on the right track. Deciding which metrics are important and what we're going to measure will create our definition of what a successful product is. So being intentional upfront will make us better product designers. And again, this is where I'm going to emphasize you really should be connecting with your customers' wants, needs, or pains as you're doing this testing and as you're setting these metrics. When you're evaluating a product prototype, I encourage you to start with customer fit metrics. There are a number of other categories of product testing, from materials testing to profitability and efficiency tests to food standards testing. In this video, we're focusing on customer fit product testing. Depending on the products you're making, you may need these other forms of testing to comply with regulations or regional requirements. So do the research for your product category and make sure you have all the tests complete that you need to bring a product to market. All right, customer fit testing. Think back to the wants, needs, and pains of your core customer group from Workshop 1 in this series. What could you measure to see if you're on track to solve one of their wants, needs, or pains? From Ian's experience in developing the soup mix, they found that some of the people that were part of their core customer group were recipients of a food hamper. They already had previous experience with this, and this helped define what a successful product would be, and they included in the specifications that the soup mix needed to be a just add water recipe, because it could not be assumed the people using the mix would have guaranteed access to milk, butter, or other ingredients that might be typical to make a mixed soup. They knew that this was a restriction in their design process because they had significant contact with their ideal customer group before they started the design of the product. This testing process is supposed to help you get closer to your customers before you invest a lot of time and money into creating multiple prototypes, and to help each version of the prototype be better than the last. For the rest of this workshop, we will be going through a couple of activities to explain a testing process. Our intention is that you'll take these lessons and apply them to tests with your ideal customers. The video activities are intended to give you the tools to be able to go into the testing room with your customers and be able to get more useful information from the testing sessions than you would otherwise. For this activity, we'll be using the testing sheet from the Design Thinking Toolbox. It's a tool that you can use to provide structure to your testing sessions. The testing sheet starts with an area to describe what the test scenario is. This is where you'll describe what you'll be getting the tester or the customer stand-in to do. Next, there's a spot for the test criteria. This is where you define what a successful test outcome would look like. You can also call it the hypothesis for the test. If we wanted to test our product use instructions, an example of a test criteria could be, does the user understand the product instructions? And are they able to correctly complete the steps without mistakes or confusion? Having a good testing criteria or hypothesis is required for the rest of the work that we'll be doing in this workshop. And if you don't know what you want to learn from a test, you'll be wasting your time in that testing session. For each test you run, there should be a single clear hypothesis or question that you're looking to answer, and everything else is based on creating a good experiment or test to get closer to an answer for that question. Next on the testing sheet are spots for procedure, roles, and questions. Procedure is where you describe the flow of the test. What will you be getting the tester to do? In which order? Roles is where you'll record who will be doing what during the test. You should have one person assigned as the person performing the test, and one person as the note taker or documenter. The roles can be flexible, and you can swap roles during the test as long as you communicate as a team to make sure there's always one person recording the information you're gathering, and to be clear to the tester that who they should be talking with in that moment. The section for questions is where you write out the questions that you intend to ask your product tester. What kinds of questions you ask will depend on how developed your prototype is, and what question you're looking to answer as your hypothesis or your criteria. Later in this video, we're going to go through more examples of good questions to ask when you get to a further developed prototype, but for now, we're going to start with the questions that are most relevant to your hypothesis. In this area, try to leave the questions as open-ended as possible so that the product tester will have more places to go with their answer and you can get more information from them. Encourage them to explain themselves further or to continue on a train of thought. Maybe ask them to tell stories about how they could see it working. Some examples of good early prototype questions include, how do you think you could use this product? What problem do you think this product solves? What do you currently do to solve that problem? What alternatives for this product can you think of? How would you use this product? What other uses do you think this product could have? What excites you about this product? How would you rate this product? Each of these questions is going to approach a different angle, but they should help create a cohesive understanding around your criteria or your hypothesis. And feel free to substitute questions as you need, depending on what you're trying to test. With these 5 sections of the testing card filled, the description of the scenario, criteria, procedure, roles, and questions, you have the foundation of a product test scenario ready to go. There are 2 more sections on the testing sheet specifically for recording the results of the test. Those 2 sections are documentation and learnings. Documentation is where you can write out the things that happened during the test. This can include specific phrases or quotes that the test user said. It can include videos or photos of the process. And it should also include notes on how the test user interacted with the product. Learnings is where you mix the documentation together with your criteria. Did you have a successful test according to the hypothesis that you included at the beginning? Taking our earlier example of a test trying to get at, does the user understand the product instructions, and are they able to successfully complete the steps without mistakes or confusion? If our research team had to explain parts of the instructions, then we should mark down that the test user did not understand the instructions, with specific notes of where they had trouble, such as potential language barriers or specific terms or jargon that may have caused confusion. The point of the learnings is that we can use them to improve the product and make it so that it better solves the problem at hand, or that the product is adjusted to solve a more important or more valuable problem that the test users have identified. Tests where the criteria fail are some of the most informative tests, because then you get to look at why they didn't work and explore with the test user why the product didn't fit. In these situations, you should ask the test user why it didn't work in a variety of different ways and with different phrasing to try to get a better understanding of their experience in the test. Okay, here's an example of a product test. I was once invited to take part in the testing process for a driver's education simulator. I had my scheduled time and I arrived at an office based on that time slot that they gave me. I was greeted by the 2 researchers. They introduced themselves, and one started asking me questions about my level of driving experience, while the other took notes on my answers. After going through these initial questions, they brought me into a room where the simulator was set up in the corner. They gave me some instructions describing how to control the driving simulator, and told me that the simulator was going to direct me to drive a certain way through a virtual neighborhood, and I was supposed to follow the traffic laws and avoid any crashes. They specifically asked me to vocalize my thoughts as I went through the situation and used the simulator. And with that, I got to the controls and went through the simulated scenario. When I got to the end of the simulation, they asked me if there was anything that was frustrating, or if there were any issues with controlling the simulator. I remember my main feedback being that the controls to look to the side were complicated and distracting, and that made it hard to scan for potential hazards. In total, I was in the testing room for between 15 and 20 minutes. In this example, there's a couple things that I want you to remember for your tests. First, you can and should build in time before your subject gets to the object being tested. You can use that time to gather some baseline information from them, and they'll be using that time to get a sense for what's coming next. Try not to bias them beforehand, but give them enough context so that you'll get a good test. Second, it was easier to talk with one person as the lead researcher, and it can be helpful to tell the research participant that the note taker can be ignored. Third, you will probably need to tell your participant to vocalize their thoughts. Most people don't do that naturally, and so being told helps them actually remember to vocalize their thoughts and opinions in the test. And fourth, there can be different kinds of feedback you collect at different times. In this example, my thoughts while using the product and my opinions or reflections after finishing the simulation will probably give them different information. And so it's important to include both. Okay, we're going to slow down. That was a lot of information about the testing sheet and what a test could look like. Now, I want to give you some time to fill in the first 5 sections of a testing sheet so that you can be ready to run your first test. You can test many times over, so for this activity, focus on the most foundational questions you have about your product and whether it fits with the customer's needs. Please take 10 minutes to fill in the scenario, criteria, procedures, roles, and questions sections of the sheet. The instructions will be on the screen, and you can pause to read them, and I'll bring the list of questions back up as well. All right, this should give you a good place to start from when you do your initial tests with your potential customers. You can do this again whenever you need to test another element in your product development journey to get a better understanding of your customers and how they connect with your product. Now that you have an idea of what you need for a useful test, again, scenario, hypothesis or criteria, procedure, roles, and questions, we can explore different methods for structuring a test. When you're just starting out, you will likely start with in-house tests, where one of your team members plays the role of the ideal customers, and you'll play out scenarios imagining what the customer will think. This is how most people start, but I want to encourage you to get out into the field to test before you're comfortable showing your product to other people. The longer that you wait to get the reactions and feedback from actual potential customers, the higher the risk will be that you're on the wrong track and the more resources you'll be putting behind efforts that might not be worth it. We'll be talking more about an iterative approach that can help you reduce your risk in the prototyping video in this series. Earlier in this video, I told a story of a testing process that I was in involving a driving test or a driving simulator. In that situation, they had set up a test with a single user to get some hands-on experience with the prototype. You can take a similar approach, but having a small group of people using your prototype for the first time together would give you a different perspective. There are some benefits and downsides to each of these approaches. With individual testers, you'll get a more unfiltered view of their opinions because there's no group pressure or guiding discussion. With a focus group, sometimes the conversation is led by 1 or 2 people and their opinion becomes the group's opinion. But on the other hand, sometimes discussion can open up thoughts and lines of thinking that individual testers wouldn't have come up with on their own. It's often easier to take notes with only one tester because there's a lot less going on at the same time, but there can be more data gathered in a short time if you have a well-facilitated focus group. Which method of early user testing you use can depend on your capacity, budget, and timeframes. Depending on the type of product you're making, you could do the testing by bringing the product to small markets. My hometown of Winnipeg is known as a testing ground for international products coming into Canada. I suspect this is because we're relatively isolated, so any potential negative reputation effects will be contained to our region. And we are notoriously budget conscious. So if a product does well in our community, then it's likely to be both economically viable and palatable to customers in many communities across Canada. Following that train of logic, is there a small community where you could sell your products as you're developing them? For food products, farmers markets are a great and common testing ground for products. If you get a stall for a season and you find that people are willing to buy your products and come back for more, then that's a strong signal that you're on the right track. If they don't sell or you get some negative feedback, then you've only paid the cost of producing the prototypes and the overhead involving things like stall fees and transportation. This kind of purchase information is also one of the strongest signals that we look for in product market fit. If people are buying your stuff, especially more than once, then you just need to understand why instead of waiting and wondering if they'll buy. Finally, you could look at making pitches to distributors of your products. This could look like approaching managers of retail stores and asking if they have any space on their shelves for new products. When you go in to ask if they have shelf space, you should have all the information and samples that they'll need to be able to make an informed decision or to provide feedback on your pitch. Not every product will fit every store, but if you do your research up front and you found stores that do sell to your target market, then they'll give you great feedback on how to develop your product and how to bring it to market. Go into these pitch meetings with two intentions. One, you want your product on their shelves. If they say yes and they want it on their shelves, it's a great vote of confidence in the product and could provide some sales data, just like I mentioned a moment ago with the farmers market stalls. Second, you want to know what it would take to get your product on their shelves if they say no to your initial pitch. This is a learning opportunity from someone that is directly in contact with your potential customers all the time. Take their feedback and apply the learnings to this broader testing process. Okay, we're going to go to another activity now. Now that you have a few options for how you could structure your testing scenarios, let's take some time to create some better questions. The essence of any good research is an excellent question or a fantastic hypothesis. It's worth spending the time to get this right. Again, we'll be drawing from the Design Thinking Toolkit, this time from their Powerful Questions and Experience Testing tool. The questions that you ask will change at each stage of your prototyping process, from your initial design documents, to the cardboard cutout, to having a functional prototype, and the prettied up final product. In the design world, these stages are called lo-fi, mid-fi, and hi-fi, representing the level of fidelity in the product design, or how closely they resemble a finished final design. Lo-fi is where all prototyping starts, with a sketch and a rough example of the product. In this stage, the questions should be about discovering the function that the product will fill for the customer, and what value they might find in it. The examples I used for Activity 1 are intended for this stage. Questions in this lo-fi stage should be about getting the customer's feedback on how they think the product should be used, how they think they could use it, and what other products they would include as competitors for the prototype. You could also ask things like, what category would they put it in to see what they're comparing it to? Questions should also include elements such as, what parts make a product like this worth buying? What products like this have failed in the past and why? And how do you currently solve the problem that this product is meant to solve? Lo-fi questions are around core problem identification and value proposition research. If you'd like more on value proposition, we have a great video on the value proposition using the business model canvas as an example. I'll include a link up here. Mid-fi is about finding the parts of the prototype that actually provide value to customers and validate the direction that the design is developing. Mid-fi questions should look at specific parts of the prototype and how it fits the customer's assumptions about the product category. Some example questions or test hypotheses include, does the prototype work as expected? Does the customer understand how the prototype works with minimal instruction? Does the prototype meet expectations? What features are missing? If the customer could make any change without budget concerns, what would they change on the prototype? How much would you pay to keep the product that's currently in your hands? Have you bought products like this before? What parts of the prototype are unnecessary or don't fit what you need? And what is the tester's experience while using the prototype? These questions are about refining the design and getting clarity on what design elements need to be adjusted or reframed, and it helps to direct the design as it gets closer to finalization. Again, in all these categories, these are just example questions, and I'm sure as you go through testing, you are going to think of more, so feel free to add to the list. Hi-fi prototype questions, on the other hand, are about getting clarity on the core value that the customer gets from the prototype, and if it's in a state that is market ready or scale-up ready. These questions should help to remove excess elements that don't provide value to the customer, and to ensure ease of use for the customers that will be purchasing the product. Some examples of hi-fi questions include, does the design of the product match its intended use? Or does it look like it should for what it does? Are there any functions of the product that you won't use? Is it easy to use? Where would you need instructions to use the product well? Does it feel like the product was made for you? Would you recommend this to a friend if they needed or wanted something that does this? Or something like this? What situation would make you use this product more often? What's your first impression of the product? What would you pay for this product? Have you bought products like this before? What other products does this remind you of? Hi-fi questions like this can also be used to clarify elements of pricing and branding, as well as to establish comparison points with other products on the market. Questions in the hi-fi stage can also help you figure out what parts are totally unnecessary in your prototype, so that you can cut off sections that would cost more to produce at scale while you're still in the prototyping phase. Now that we've gone over what good questions can look like at several different points in the prototyping journey, I'd like to set aside some time for you to create a few questions that fit the stage of prototyping testing that you are in. Start by clarifying 1. What stage of testing you're in, 2. Identifying key questions or assumptions that your team has about the product and its fit with the customers, and 3. Start creating or picking questions that will help you answer your questions about the customer fit for your product prototype, or to clarify and confirm assumptions that you have about the fit with the customers. All right, thank you for following along. Now you should have a list of assumptions that you need to test, and you can go back and repeat activity 1 from earlier in this video to create new testing scenarios to answer them. This process of testing only ends if you decide the product is done. It's kind of like art that way, where you never really finish, it's just good enough, and you're ready to move on to the next stages. As you get answers to each of your assumptions and the customer-related questions, this will help you adjust your design to make it a better fit with the customer groups that you've brought in for testing. This can lead to fundamental shifts in the core design, and it can help inform small changes, such as how the product is packaged or how the instructions are written. With each test, you will reduce the risk of creating a product that fails to sell. And as you get closer to the core of what the customer wants, you'll have the chance to reduce costs on elements that your customers just don't care about. Now, it's my hope that you'll go out, create some tests, and this helps you make better products. Thank you for watching video 3 in the Steps to a Sale-Ready Product video workshop series. Thank you again to LITE for partnering with us to create these, and you can find a link to the full series in the description of this video. If you have any questions about social enterprise development, you can feel free to reach out to me, info@StrategyMadeSimple.ca. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at matthewrempel.bluesky.social.